He touched me slowly, deliberately, and my husband didn't stop him. That was the moment I realized the therapist wasn't just helping us. He was leading me somewhere unfamiliar, somewhere I hadn't been in years. Before we dive in, please take a moment to like this video and hit subscribe. It's quick, effortless, and supports the channel more than you know. Thanks for being here. Now, let's begin. She just lies there, my husband said, his voice clipped, bitter. No reaction, no sound. It's like I'm the only one in the room. I turned to him, my gaze slow and sharp. Maybe that's because you don't know how to make me feel anything. His eyes blinked in surprise, shoulders tensing. Excuse me? I didn't flinch. Maybe you're not as good as you think. Maybe that's why I feel like a corpse. The tension in the room thickened, pressing against the walls. The therapist remained still, mid-50s, silver to temples, a tailored suit that fit him too well. His presence carried weight, each movement intentional. He let the silence stretch, watching us with the precision of a surgeon poised over an incision point. So, he said calmly, neither of you are satisfied. I leaned back, arms crossing. My husband just stared ahead, his jaw locked. When did it start? The therapist asked. My husband shrugged. I don't know. A while ago. It just stopped working. Then his gaze shifted to me. And you? I hesitated. I don't know. The therapist didn't look away. He studied me as if he already knew the answer. You're not detached, he said finally. You're bored. I shifted in my seat, uncrossing and recrossing my legs. You're trapped in the same script, he continued. Your body doesn't react to what it already expects. My husband scoffed under his breath, but didn't speak. And when you know exactly how it starts and ends, the therapist added, his voice smoother now, it stops feeling real. It becomes routine. I tried not to react, but his words slithered beneath my skin, heavy and undeniable. What are we supposed to do? My husband asked, his tone losing its edge. The therapist leaned forward, just slightly not intrusive, but intentional. Break the pattern, he said. Do something that doesn't give her time to think. Something unfamiliar. Something physical. I realized I'd been holding my breath. My husband glanced at me, unsure. Like what? The therapist's lips curled faintly. His eyes lingered on me longer than they should have. Experiment. We discussed it on the drive home. Again the next morning. Sitting across from each other in silence, stirring coffee that had gone cold. By nightfall, we had made a decision. He turned me onto all fours, hands gripping my hips, his movements more focused, more deliberate, like he was trying to break through something unseen. Don't think, he murmured, breathless. Just let go. I clutched the sheets, concentrating on the rhythm, the tension in his fingers, the pressure mounting with every shift of his body. I wanted it to work. I wanted to feel something. But my body felt distant, responsive, yet hollow, like there was something missing between each breath. When it was over, he rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling. I remained there for a moment before slipping out of bed and walking to the bathroom without a word. The next night, I took control. I climbed on top, kissed his neck, moved my hips the way I used to. He exhaled softly, hands resting at my waist, trying to follow my lead. I made all the right sounds, touched him in all the ways I knew he liked. But it felt like performing a memory. My body was present, but everything else was silent. He didn't ask how it felt. I didn't pretend. A few days later, we tried in the kitchen. No warning, just his hands at my waist, turning me around, lips brushing against my neck. He guided me forward over the counter, his touch urgent, unspoken. His hands moved to his belt, the soft clink of metal breaking the silence. I pressed my palms against the edge, waiting for something, anything, to change. But I noticed the fridge magnets, a stack of unopened mail, a forgotten wine glass. Whatever he was trying to reach, I wasn't there to meet him halfway. The last time we tried, it was in the shower. Steam thickened the air as he pulled me in, his arms wrapping around me without a word. Water cascaded over us as he kissed my shoulder, hands trailing down my sides, holding me close, slowly, as if afraid to scare the moment away. I leaned into the cool tile, eyes closed, trying to stay present, trying not to drift. "Just feel me," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. Water rolled over my skin in soft waves, his hands moving with quiet certainty, as if he still believed this could work. For a fleeting moment, I believed it too, a flicker, a pull deep in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. But it faded just as quickly, and when he finally stepped away, I lingered behind the curtain, letting the water drown out the silence. New positions, different places, changing the rules. It still wasn't enough. "Maybe it's not working," I murmured. We lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The last attempt felt like all the others, hollow. "We need to go further," he said. I turned my head to look at him. "Further how?" His jaw tightened. "We'll figure out." That night, he tied my wrist to the headboard. The rope was snug, the fibers rough against my skin. I tested the restraint, feeling the bite of tension, the way it held firm. Then came the blindfold, smooth fabric drawn over my eyes, darkness settling in, heightening everything else. The mattress shifted and the air thickened, the silence almost sentient. Then his hands found me. There was no hesitation. His grip was strong on my waist as his mouth traced down my neck, over my collarbone, heat following the slow, deliberate path. I gasped as his fingers drifted lower, exploring, his touch heavier than usual, more insistent. He didn't speak, just moved, closing the space between us, his weight pressing against me. I still felt nothing. My body reacted, but something inside me remained distant. I flinched, wrists pulling instinctively against the rope. "Relax," he murmured. I tried. His rhythm was measured, controlled, each movement more intentional, like he was holding something back. The bed creaked beneath us, my body following his lead, the blindfold keeping me tethered to sensation, blocking out thought. I matched his movements, let him take control, surrendered to the moment. Still, nothing ignited inside me. No spark, no shift. He slowed, his breath uneven, frustration radiating off his skin. I need to try something else. His voice was steady, sure. He reached up, untying the knots with shaking fingers, rubbing my wrist before gently guiding me onto my stomach. I felt him reposition behind me, his breathing deep, measured, then a pause, hesitation, followed by pressure. My body tensed. "Wait, trust me." I inhaled sharply, felt him adjust, careful, unhurried. A different kind of strain coiled within me, tightening everything inside. He held steady, each movement precise, deliberate. I stayed quiet, forcing myself not to pull away, willing myself to stay present. His grip remained strong, his pace unyielding. He was giving everything, reaching for something just beyond his grasp. I searched for it too. The change, the shift, the moment where something would click back into place. Nothing. When it was over, he collapsed beside me, chest rising and falling in the quiet. I lay still, blindfold askew, wrists tingling, feeling nothing but the lingering ache of effort spent. The silence stretched between us, heavy, expectant. Then, softly, I whispered, still nothing. I swallowed, turning my face toward the ceiling. Still nothing. We were back in his office. "I don't know what else to do," my husband admitted. "We've tried." I laid everything bare. The therapist observed us in silence for a moment before speaking. "You've done more than most," he acknowledged, "but effort isn't always the answer. Sometimes it's about experience." My husband shifted in his seat. "What kind of experience?" The therapist leaned in slightly, his tone measured, guided, controlled, shared with someone who understands how to lead. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. I felt its weight before I fully grasped the meaning. "You mean you?" I asked, my voice quieter than intended. His expression remained composed. "I understand the importance of patience, of trust. You wouldn't have to guess anymore. You'd be following." My husband blinked, processing. "You're suggesting that you be part of this?" "Only if it's what you both want," the therapist assured. "But for what I've seen, the problem isn't a lack of love. It's that you've never truly let go." I swallowed. "And you think you can help me do that?" His gaze didn't waver. I know I can. My husband turned to me, searching for something in my expression. I didn't look away. I'd be there the entire time, the therapist added, reading you, adjusting, giving you permission to feel. No one spoke. Then he stood and crossed the room, stopping in front of me. He didn't touch me at first, just met my gaze, waiting. May I? I nodded. His fingers brushed my jaw, light but deliberate. Then he leaned in and kissed me, soft, unhurried. I didn't pull away. Without a word, he stepped behind me and began undoing each layer of my clothing, his movements precise, effortless. My shirt slid from my shoulders, my bra unfastened in a single motion. Cool air kissed my skin as he peeled everything away, drawing fabric down in a single sweep until I stood before him, exposed. But I wasn't cold. I wasn't afraid. I was simply waiting. Behind me, I heard my husband's breath, shallow and steady, still watching, still silent. The therapist placed his palm gently between my shoulder blades and guided me toward the couch. I followed. He helped me recline, then settled beside me. His mouth found the curve of my neck, trailing downward, lips grazing my collarbone before descending further. No rush, no agenda, just presence. His hand skimmed my hips, paused, then settled. A warmth bloomed, not sharp, not jarring, just there. He didn't ask if I felt it. He didn't need to. He simply continued, attuned to every shift in my breath, every slight movement of my body. My hips stirred, barely perceptible at first, then again. He adjusted, subtly, instinctively. I wasn't floating away this time. I wasn't pulling back. I was here. A quiet creak of the floor behind us. My husband had moved closer. The therapist rose, unbuttoned his shirt, and placed it neatly to the side. Then, without force, without demand, he reached for my hand. I let him. He guided me, though to where I didn't know. I didn't ask, but I didn't resist. He kissed me again, slow and steady, then eased me back down. He moved over me, aligning us seamlessly. No abrupt motions, no artificial beginning, just closeness. His presence pressed against me, warm, solid, grounding. His hand steadied my hips, moving not for reaction, but for rhythm. And this time, I responded without thinking. My fingers found his shoulders, not to push, not to guide, but simply to hold. His hand slipped beneath me, tilting my hips ever so slightly. A shift, subtle, barely a breath. But something inside me changed. A hum, a spark between one moment and the next. From the corner of my vision, I saw my husband now standing beside us. His breathing had deepened, his eyes locked onto me, absorbing everything. The therapist slowed and turned his head. She's ready. He guided my husband forward, lifting his arm, positioning him carefully. And then he remained, one hand on my thigh, the other resting against my stomach. A tether, an anchor, a quiet presence holding me steady as my husband leaned over me. I didn't tense. I didn't hesitate. I welcomed him. The rhythm resumed, familiar but altered, deeper. My body adapted, breath sinking to the movement. The therapist's hand never left me, grounding me in sensation, in certainty. Every inhale felt fuller, every second drawing me closer to something unnamed. The air thickened, the space around us pulsed, and then it opened. No sharp burst, no chaos, just release, like I had returned to myself, fully and finally. My back arched once. My fingers clenched the cushion. I exhaled completely for the first time in what felt like forever. No doubt, no distance, no performance, just feeling. And it was real. For the first time in so long, I felt something again. But I still don't know if it was healing or something else entirely. Would you ever let someone else step in to fix what you couldn't? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss what's next. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.